You're welcome back. Doing something a little bit different today. I wanted to show off a modern deck that I've been playing recently to pretty good success. I've only played 36 matches with the deck, so take my results with a grain of salt, but I've got about a 78% win rate just with this deck alone, so I've been really enjoying it. And I'll show it off here. So it's a Fleshraker deck that's a little bit different to the other ones that you'll be seeing around recently. Um, some of them like to play Basking Brood Scale and that combo. Uh, there are other variants with more color requirements, some blue, but this one is pure and simple colorless. Um, the advantage of this deck over the other ones is that you get to play Chalice. The green versions usually play Ancient Stirrings, Utopia Sprawl, and then Consign to Memory in the sideboard, but this version has basically no requirements for 1 mana cards, except for the one Shadow Spear in the main deck. So you really get to get the most out of Chalice in this deck. And the other benefit of the deck is that you're able to power it out very effectively. So you've got two main ways to power out a Chalice on one. With this version, you can play either an Ugin's Labyrinth plus pitching one of the 7 pitchables over here to give you 2 mana turn 1 to play Chalice on 1. Otherwise, you can play an Artifact Land plus a Mox Opal plus either of these 0 drops to give you 2 mana on turn 1 as well. So the deck has a surprisingly high consistency and redundancy in its ability to make a Chalice on turn 1. But also has a lot of staying power and a lot of late game value, which you might not typically be able to see with decks that are trying to kind of have a prison element with Chalice. This deck can go pretty quickly, pretty all in on the Chalice, but it also has a lot of late game potential with Vorkhan the Great Creator, 2 Mystic Forges, 4 Devourers, which you can very realistically cast off of your temples and your Ugin Labs. 4 Kozilek's Command. Anyone who's played with this card recently knows it's just super good. So you get to use 4 of these, and there's never any awkwardness in your mana base to cast it. So that's also another benefit. And yeah, you really do get to make the most out of Glaring Fleshraker. It's really not too difficult to go Fleshraker into Mystic Forge. Usually play a couple spells that turn, and then if you untap, you're pretty much going to win the game very consistently. If you ever get 2 Fleshrakers going, it's 4 damage per color spell, so it's almost trivial to win when you've got 2 Fleshrakers resolved. Obviously, this is a 3 mana 2/2, so it is a bit vulnerable. But again, another part of the beauty of this deck is the Chalice. On 1, if you go turn 1, so Ugin's Lab into Chalice on 1, into turn 2, Fleshraker, it's going to be protected from bolts, fatal bushes, galvanic discharge, you name it. It's going to be a lot safer. And yeah, when you untap with this card, you just feel like the world's your oyster. You just do whatever you want to do, and often your opponent just ends up dying because you cast a flurry of spells. Fleshraker plus Kozilek's Command is another kind of pseudo fireball you get to do. You just play Fleshraker, play Kozilek's Command, make Scions and spawn, and scry X draw a card, and you can very easily kind of use this as a fireball effectively. If you put 5 mana into a Kozilek's Command, it's going to deal 4 damage off the Fleshraker, so the cast trigger is going to deal a damage, and then the 3 spawn entering is going to deal 3 more. So you've turned your 5 mana into 4 damage, plus you get all these Scions. You only go down 1 mana effectively when you're doing that kind of play, and you also get to scry a bunch and draw a card. And it's very easy just to like string together a couple of Kozilek's Commands, or play Fleshraker, play Forge, and then stack your library with the Kozilek's Command to cast another bunch of spells to go off there. And then the deck also just has the great option to pivot into the Saga plan. You can play. I've played so many games where you just go turn 1 Saga, turn 2 Ugin's Lab, and just start activating. When you're activating Saga on turn 2, it usually keeps up in this format. It is a little bit of a scary proposition because you just kind of stick to doing the same one thing for the whole game, but you pump out a lot of power, and then you're able to get a Shadow Spear, and it's usually good enough to do the trick. And then if you need to pivot off of this, if it's not going to work, you can start playing a Chalice or something different. So yeah, I've been very impressed with the deck, reaching a pretty good win rate as a result. The consistency of the Mox Opal being on is pretty good when you've got 5 main deck artifact lands and then plenty of cheap artifacts to turn it on. I think the Mind Stone's a good fit just to bridge the gap between making sure Opal's on and getting to your other 4-drops. So often you can, if you haven't got a Chalice in hand, you can go turn 1 Lab into Mind Stone into Karn on turn 2 or Mystic Forge on turn 2, and that's a pretty commanding position to be in. And yeah, you've just got a lot of options with how you want to play it. Like a lot of games, you can either play turn 1 Mind Stone, or you can hold up a Saga activation on turn 2, or you can just play a Chalice. Really, the deck is kind of whatever you want it to be when you need it, and you just got to work out what your opponent's doing, get familiar with the meta, which is obviously hard to do right now given the format's been shaken up a bit, but you can very quickly, after, I guess, 7 legs with the deck, I've found it to be not too difficult to work out how you want to approach each matchup. Just knowing how good Chalice is a big part of that, and yeah, even if you pick wrong and you just go, I'm going to go in on Fleshraker when you maybe shouldn't have, it often still works out because the deck is just very inherently powerful. So as far as actual card choices, we've got 20 lands. Citadel turning on Opal is kind of good. A lot of people are melting down in the sideboard right now, so I think having Citadel is preferable to having the Treasure Vault. It is a little awkward if you get Collector Roofed, which is happening quite a bit, but that's neither here nor there. You can't do too much about that. So I'm playing the Citadels. 4 Eldrazi Temple is great. You've got 4, 8, 11, 15 Eldrazi spells. So this is very consistently a soul land for you. The 1 Gemstone Cavern seems fine. I'm playing 2 islands at the moment. I've just added the second one because a lot of people are kind of turning back to that Coffers decks that have got they've got Field of Ruin and Demolition Field. Some people are playing Ghost Quarter, Arbiter stuff against me, and there's also Boseiju Loops with Ren, which are pretty scary. So I'm going to play the 2 basics just to hedge against that slightly. It doesn't really impact or doesn't hurt your mana base too much. You're already getting all the good 4 of lands that you're really excited to play. You still get those. So the last 7 or so lands that you pick for the deck can kind of be a little bit interchangeable. But I think Citadel to keep Opal going, and 2 basics and the Gemstone Caverns have been good. 1 Treasure Vault's been fine. Just keep the artifact count high. And some games you just get to maybe 7 mana, crack the Treasure Vault, get 3 treasures, and then Emrakul costs less because you've got an artifact and a land in the graveyard, and then you can play Emrakul a turn quicker than you might have been able to otherwise. Also, the treasures can pump up your Saga tokens, so that's pretty nice. Ugin's Lab is definitely one of the best cards in the deck. If you can pitch to it, it's your deck really hums, but sometimes you haven't got that many pitchables. I've landed on 7 pitchables for Ugin's Lab. There's definitely a bit of a tension between being a Mystic Forge deck and being a Ugin's Lab deck. Like with Mystic Forge, you want to keep your curve super low. With Ugin's Lab, you need to pay 7 drops that are colorless. So there's always a bit of a disconnect between these two. I think I've hit a pretty good balance between the two, but it's one of the troubles with this deck is there's always going to be kind of this tension between the two. And then Saga, as I mentioned earlier, is just an all-star. Does it all. Gives you a good alternate plan if you don't want to try and Flesh Rake, and you don't have to stick to the Saga plan. You can just play it out and get a Mox Opal just to kind of have a bit of a mana boost early in the game. The Mishra's Baubles, just helping out the Opal, also good for the Flesh Raker to get more triggers. Playing 2 Everflowing Chalice. I started at 4 and I've been slowly working my way down. It's good off the Mystic Forges just to clear the top card. Sometimes you just play it to turn on an Opal. It's good to play on 0 for Flesh Raker as well. And then a lot of the games, when you've got the turn 1 lab, you still want to play either a Mind Stone or an Everflowing Chalice if you don't have a Chalice to play, or Chalice of the Void to play. So it does a pretty good Mind Stone impression as well. And then surprisingly often I've actually done it for 4 mana. Going from 4 mana, playing this up to 6 mana, and then the following turn playing a land and casting a 7-drop has been a surprisingly common play pattern, and one that's often good enough. It's not plan A, but sometimes you just go Ugin's Lab into a Mind Stone, turn 2 land, play Chalice, and then turn 3 you're just starting to play Devourers and Null Drifters, and you're kind of off to the races. So 2 Chalice has been good. I could go back up to 3, but we're just trying 2 at the moment. I found the Shadowspear to be the best one-of tutorable target for Saga. The deck's very good against combo decks. You've got a lot of hate in the form of Karn, Chalice, Kozilek's Command for graveyard strategies, for Breach, any kind of strategy that's doing something unfair. You're pretty well covered between these 12 cards. So I've kind of respected the fair matchups a little bit more with the Shadowspear as my one Saga target. Ocelot Brides and Bowmasters and stuff, they just kind of gun off the board, so being able to trample and lifelink over them is a really big deal in the current modern meta. So happy to play the Shadowspear. The Mind Stone's just kind of filler. Again, gets you from 2 to 3 and then up to 4 to play your meaty 4-drops, and just cycles in the late game. The deck does have a very high number of mana sources, so I think the Mind Stones are kind of necessary over the Chalices. Like, you'd be surprised how often you end up cycling these quite aggressively. The Namesake card, Fleshraker, if you haven't played with it, it looks pretty good. It just plays unbelievably well. It's so easy to go turn 1, Temple, turn 2, like Darksteel Citadel, Fleshraker, Opal, Bauble, play Chalice on 1, and some other spell. Like, you can just kind of storm off. It's unbelievable, and it'll just do 5 damage along the way. If it stays in play for like between 2 and 5 turns, depending on the pace of the game, it can just win the game single-handedly. I've played so many games where I've won without even attacking, just on Fleshraker triggers. So yeah, the card's very good. If you get the chance to play with it, I'd recommend it just to get a feel for it, because it reads well, but when you play with it, you'll see what I mean. Mystic Forge, the other Namesake card, it's a little bit awkward in the deck because there is a high curve with everything up here. So I'm just playing the 2 at the moment, but there is 1 in the sideboard you can Karn fetch for, so you effectively have 6 that you have access to. I think 2 is a good main deck number. Then I guess Karn is the next 4-drop that you want to be focusing on. I'll show you the Karn board when I get to that soon, but yeah, there's plenty of options, and Karn really holds the team together. Can do a lot of good things that the main deck can't do, and it gives you the interaction that you need as a fast mana deck to keep up with the unfair strategies. Devourer is just a concession to the Ugin's Labs, and also helps kind of select the things that you're missing. You can keep hands that have got a lot of fast mana, but they might not have a good threat, and Devourer can find one of your 4-drops or maybe an Null Drifter to kind of keep the juices flowing. Playing 2 Null Drifter. This is probably the weakest card in the deck, actually. It's just there for Ugin pitchable targets, but it's also not too bad to evoke it. It isn't too hard to go, like, I've had games where I go turn 1, Gemstone Caverns, pitch something, and then, turn 0, Gemstone Caverns, pitch. Then on my turn 1, I play Eldrazi Temple, and then just turns into a Divination in hands where you haven't got an Ugin's Lab. So the fail state of turning it into Divination is actually not too bad, and often when you do turn into Divination, it's more like a 2-mana Divination, because your Eldrazi Temples are actually making 2, so you can do it as soon as turn 1. And yeah, very easily do it turn 2 quite often. And then as a 7-mana threat, it's not terrible, but pretty unexciting. This slot, I've looked at the other 7-drops, like All Is Dust, the one that counters a spell that targets a big colorless creature of yours. Even Skittering Invasion I've looked at, which plays well with the Fleshraker. But I think Nuldrift is a good mix of large threat plus utility in the mid game to keep the cards flowing. The one Emrakul I've been pretty happy with as well. I don't really get rid of my own graveyard when we go to the sideboard. My graveyard hate of choice doesn't actually target my graveyard, so generally speaking, my graveyard stays intact pretty well. And it's not too hard to get Emrakul down to 7 or 8 mana pretty consistently when you've got Kindred instants, enchantment lands that are always going to the graveyard. Baubles go to the graveyard very quickly. Often your Fleshrakers get killed, so you can easily have 2, 4, 5, 6 types in the graveyard pretty quickly. And then this is already costing 7, which is very achievable off of Temples, All This Ramp, and Ugin's Labs. I'm honestly considering increasing the number of Emrakuls, but I'm just doing one for the time being. They could switch a Nuldrifter for an Emrakul, but Nuldrifters aren't too bad. The Chalices I spoke about earlier, you power them out very well, and in the current meta, when everyone's Faithless Looting or Green Sunning for 0, or just playing a low curve like you tend to do in Modern, the Chalice is just a backbreaking card in play. And still good on the draw, that it often just locks out hands, protects your Fleshrakers, protects your Khans from bolts is also another key factor about why you want to be chalicing. So yeah, just an all-round really good card to be including in the deck, I've found. The Kozilek's Command is everything and more. It just does it all. It gives you the interaction that you've been missing, gives you main deck removal, gives you main deck graveyard hate at instant speed, and there's also just a great mid-game threat, a good or incredible late-game just way to close out the entire game. You just scry a bunch, find 2 big threats, and just slam them both on the same turn. And yeah, it's a crazy card. I think the stock of Kozilek's Command actually even gone further up recently. Decks that are trying to turn on Green Sun Zenith into Dryad Arbor, you can just tap a Eldrazi Temple to kill a Dryad Arbor and draw a card. So that's like, if that lines up for you, you get a clean 2 for 1, and it's just a strip mine. This card's just good and keeps getting better and better. Kills construct tokens for 1 mana, for 2 mana. And often you can just cycle it as well and kill like a token off of a Rumble. So, card's great, even in the early game, great in the mid game, and often unbeatable in the late game. So, not much more I could say about. Well, I can't really sing higher praises of Kozilek's Command. It's just an all-star. One of the key reasons to play the deck. There's a lot of the deck really has a lot of things going for it. If we're looking just at the main deck, kind of recap. You've got the Saga game plan, you've got multiple different soul lands. Chalice is really strong right now. Kozilek's Command's great. Devour is surprisingly good just as a giant Flame Tongue Kavu kind of effect. Khan's good again. People have sleeved up a lot more Mox Opals now that it's unbanned. And they're playing more artifact decks, I suppose I should say, because they want to make the most of Mox Opal, and Khan just turning that off is really quite exceptional. And then Fleshraker is an all-star as well. As far as the sideboard goes, a lot of it is Khan targets, but these 6 cards here that's not really the case. There are some matchups where your Chalices or your Khans aren't good. So against aggressive decks, Khan just gets attacked. It's 4 mana, draw a card, then gains 3 life, or absorbs a bolt. So sometimes you do need to cut Khan in the faster matchups. And generally speaking, those faster matchups are ones where I want to play a Thought-Knot to kind of disrupt a combo or something similar, get a large creature down. So Thought-Knot often will swap for Khan in spots like that. Got 3 Dismembers. A lot of decks are playing Oculus, they side in Oof, they'll play Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, any deck that's got like really meaty early plays, I'm happy to bring Dismember in against. And yeah, often against the red-based strategies, they'll bring in Magus, and you'll be happy to be able to tick it off with a Dismember, or green decks will bring in Collector Roof, and you want to be able to cover it with Dismember as well. So I'm not quite at the point where I would main deck Dismember, but I'm happy that it's when your opponent's siding in impactful sideboard cards that are creatures, Dismember is a great way to kind of circumvent and reduce the impact of that. And as for the rest of the cards in the sideboard, mostly Karn targets. The Metamorph is first and foremost a way to make another Fleshraker. As I was saying earlier, if you get 2 Fleshrakers going, it's almost trivial to win the game. So sometimes you'll play Fleshraker into Karn, minus go get Metamorph, and then next turn untap minus get Forge, and then you can like copy Fleshraker, play Forge, and then just kind of go off from there. This is also a concession to creativity. If you Karn minus and they have a Archon of Cruelty in play, you can copy their Archon, kill their Archon, and be ahead on board. Ballista is kind of just a fair option. Often you'll get to 4 to 6 mana and your opponent's got a couple of little dudes that you want to just pick off. This is really just my answer to a fair option that affects the board as a Karn target. So happy with Ballista for the most part. Sometimes you also just have heaps of mana and it'll end the game the turn you cast it just as a pseudo fireball. So Ballista's pretty good. The Mystic Forge, as I was saying, if you want to Karn for it in a slower game, there's one on the side to let you do that. Ensnaring Bridge, keep your Karn safe in matchups where you don't need to attack. Sometimes you're behind on board and you're not able to play constructs to kind of gun up the board, so you'll just play a bridge and then hope to start finding Fleshrakers and then kill them with Fleshraker pings, or that's probably the main strategy at that point. One coding, if you want to Karn and you're scared of your opponent's lands, or you get Karn down on turn 2 and you just want to start going after their mana, then the coding's there for that. The Soulguide Lantern is one of 2 graveyard hate pieces I've got. I've got a Tormod's Crypt and a Soulguide. Generally speaking, if I'm playing against a graveyard deck, I want to bring the Soulguide into the main and leave the Tormod's Crypt in the side. Reason for that being, you can search up the Soulguide with the Saga, and then you still have the Tormod's Crypt in the sideboard to minus with Karn to get it. So it means Karn's still got a 0 mana artifact hate option. Your Sagas all have graveyard hate options. So it just gives you a lot of coverage against the graveyard decks by having these 2 split between main deck and sideboard post game 2 or 3. Needle is a good shootable target, important against Yawgmoth. There'll be a lot of options for why this is good, but you'll figure it out as you go. Just gives you an angle of attack to cover random planeswalkers or things you hadn't really thought about. So I've been happy with the Needle. And then 1 Treasure Vault as well, just as a Karn target to grab a land. Often you just need that. You don't need any more action. Your hand could be full of Kozilek's commands and Null Drifters and stuff, given that the curve of the deck is pretty high, so you'd be surprised how often you just Karn minus grab a land, and then you're just ready to play a bigger spell the following turn. So that's the deck. I've been really happy with it. I haven't really found too many matchups that scare me. Most of my losses have been 1-2s. There's only been a couple 0-2 losses where I've kind of felt helpless. I guess the Broodscale deck does a lot of similar things to this, but they've also got Haywire Mites and Thief of Existence in the board, so they kind of do what I'm doing a bit better and a bit more streamlined. So that deck is a bit scary. If that deck picks up, then I'm not in love with this. But other than that, I like this version. It's very streamlined in terms of no colors or no colored requirements. Has some consistent nut draws with your either Uggin's Lab or Mox Opal on turn 1, and then has a lot of staying power and a lot of grit to it. So yeah, try sleeving it up if you want to play some Modern. If you've got any questions about the deck, please hit me up in the comments, and I'll talk to you guys next time. See ya. Bye.